So on this week's episode of Be More Super, the podcast, I'm really excited because, the voiceover and the voice acting industry has always been a mystery to me. So I'm always excited to get these wonderful guests on. And this guest has lent his voice to many things, from Lego Star Wars, The Skywalker Saga, Back to the Future, the game, Star Wars Jedi Survivor, and soon to be released, Gremlins, The Secret of the Mogwai. Is AJ LoCascio. AJ, welcome to the show, sir.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Do you know what? It's an absolute pleasure. And I've just realised that I had one of your co-stars from a previous project on the show a little while back, David Mencken.
Luke.
Luke Skywalker. And it's just strange, isn't it? How like the industry is sort of like connected in so many ways. I mean, have you all got like a WhatsApp group going where you like chat to each other?
I wish, but no, it's smaller than any of us realize. I'm always shocked to be like, oh, you know so-and-so, or so-and-so's your best friend, or was there in the delivery room when you had your first baby. Like everyone knows everyone. It's like I was working with Tom Lennon and I was telling him what a big fan of Weird Al I was. Not that I know Weird Al. And he was like, oh, Weird Al was there when I had my first child. He was in the delivery room with me. And I was like, what?
That is awesome.
Yeah, but everybody seems to know everybody. But David and I had never met because we only worked, remotely. He's in, God, where is he? Norway, or England, London?
Yeah.
And but he's a fantastic Luke. He's probably the best Luke I've heard as far as matching Mark Hamill's pitch and stuff goes.
And such a nice guy as well to talk to. Really, really is. So before we get into Gremlins, as well as the other amazing projects that you've done, I mean, what made you decide to go into this voice industry and not another industry? Because I suppose like acting on screen, it's got to be one of the most competitive industries to be in.
I mean, I feel like I ever decided to get into voiceover. It was kind of a fluke. My origin story is I heard there was going to be a Back to the Future video game, and I called the company and left a voicemail as Marty McFly. After the encouragement of my cousin being like, you have to voice Marty in this. And I was like, that's absurd. I don't know how to do that. And so I left a voicemail, didn't hear anything back. And then I moved out to LA, and then I got a message that was like, hey, it's between you. Actually, that's not true. I did hear something back. I got like an email that was like, can you send in another audition? And then I didn't hear anything for 3 months. And then I happened to move out to LA, and like a week after moving out here, they were like, hey, it's between you and one other dude. Can you re-audition? And I was like, yeah. So that was the start of it. But then, like a couple years, like 2 or 3 years elapsed where after Back to the Future, I think people were like, he's just the Marty McFly guy. So he's, that's it. He's a one-trick pony. And so I had to sort of fight to figure out how to get an agent, how to sort of build a career and start doing more stuff. So I never really... It's weird. I didn't really decide to become a voice actor. I was just like, this is fun. I like this. So, because I was editing in those years between, Marty McFly and The Croods was like the first big thing that I did after that, the TV show and video games and stuff. So, I have a weird, slow, strange origin story. But as far as on-camera stuff goes, I don't know. Like it looks fun, but it's not. The opportunities haven't presented themselves. Someday, maybe if it does, sure. But right now, I'm enjoying what I'm doing.
I mean, there's thousands of people out there that obviously want to have a stab at being a voice actor, and everyone that I've spoken to in passing, they're like, "Oh yeah, I do voiceovers and everything like that." But realistically, for people at your standard and your level, how hard is it to get to that level of being a voice actor in the projects that you do? And what advice would you give to those people wanting to maybe follow in your footsteps?
It's weird to be giving advice. It feels like such a, I'm like, me? Really? You want to hear from me? The guy who, goes like for a living. It's which I guess is fun, but I mean, it really starts with your voice reel. I think that's having a good voice reel and being able to show what you can do in under 60 seconds, because no one wants to listen to a 10-minute reel of you doing Peter Griffin and all that stuff. That's having a really solid reel, and just having it out there, submitting it to agents, is key. And then I think one of the biggest things that people overestimate or overlook is you have to be able to act. I got kind of angry at a dude I was at a bar, and a guy was like, "I heard you're a voice actor. I do voices." And I was like, "All right." I was like, "Can you act? Do you know how to act?" He's like, "I don't need to act to be a voice actor." And I was like, "All right." I was like, I was like, I gotta go. But like learning just basic acting, like learning how to act and emote, because it's funny to hear on camera friends and stuff talk about how difficult it is to do voice acting, because you don't have the whole instrument. You can't just look at someone and convey something. It's all in your voice. And then trying to be nice, like being someone that people want to hang out with, is a really big key factor. I know so many people that are, you could be talented, but like if no one wants to hang out with you because you're overbearing or whatever, it's a big thing. People take that into consideration, where it's like, oh my god, do I want to hang out with this guy for however many hours in a booth when they're constantly like, hey, I'm at, like there's I think it's like any job, just being someone who's empathetic and listens and is kind is not something people talk about. But most voice actors I know are people you're like, oh man, yeah, I want to hang out with you outside of this. So I think that's a big key. Excuse me as I take sips from my Incredibles mug, by the way.
It's fine. I was going to have a cup of coffee with me, but my wife forgot to get coffee. So this is the first interview I've ever done without a cup of coffee next to me.
I'm so sorry. If you glaze over, I'll understand why. So
it is fine. I've got kids. I've sort of slept today. It's my day off today from work, and it was my birthday yesterday. So I've had a couple of days. Thank you so much. Getting older, feeling older, I've got to say. The grey hair is still coming along, but hey ho. But no, I mean, what I would say is that, when you said about this bar incident, is that people think of voice actors as such an easy job, but I did performing arts and I did acting at university, and being on stage and actually working with the script is one thing, but one thing I would never do is go into voice acting, because it's very unforgiving, I've got to say, because people are just listening with their ears. It's sort of, they're not visually seeing you acting on stage. So what's been the biggest challenge that you faced from starting out with Back to the Future to now, to getting to where you are now? I mean, what sort of obstacles do you face as a voice actor?
I mean, one of the biggest things is, when you see, it's weird because it's more about exposure and people becoming familiar with you, where it's like, if you see someone in an episode of something or in a movie, you go, oh, wow, that's that guy. But with voice acting, it's completely anonymous. So, if I book Gizmo, it's not because I booked some other character in something. I'm at the same playing field as everyone else, I'm very lucky now that finally people are going, okay, I think I've heard of that name before because he worked on something, but like, you have no face, you have no presence really, unless someone has worked with you directly for years. So it's very different from on-camera acting or other things, because your job is to constantly morph into other people. So it's weird when like I was saying with Marty McFly, people are like, oh, that was good. You did a good Michael J. Fox. That's it. So like you trying to constantly, you have to go up to bat like everyone else. Like it's not, when I got Gizmo, I was just some dude, like it was the same playing field as everybody else. There wasn't any, I asked the Z, the executive producer, actually while we were at Comic-Con on stage, I was like, why did you cast me? Like, can't everyone do this voice? And he was like, well, when I listened to the file, yours was just the one that sounded the most like Gizmo. And I was like, that's it, huh? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, okay, no, like he didn't like look at my IMDb or anything and go, okay, I like these other things he's done. But I think that's the biggest challenge, is when you're doing voiceover, you're completely anonymous. And I think it's also like when you watch a cartoon or a game or something, I don't think we're often thinking about, wow, what a cool performance. We're just thinking about the thing we're watching. We're going, oh, that's neat. So, sorry, I hiccuped or something. But yeah, so it's tough because you're always behind so many layers to try to, get people to be like, hey, look at me, I can do it. Is very difficult.
I mean, I suppose it can be quite difficult because going from, like, say, Harrison Ford as Han Solo in the Lego Star Wars game, I suppose then someone wouldn't say he's perfect for Gizmo. So it's got to be difficult to go from one character to the next. I mean, did you find it challenging? So during the pandemic, a lot of actors were out of work. So all these voice actors like yourself that have got these home booths and wonderful setups. Did you find it, one, slightly annoying that literally every actor then turned to voice acting, and two, how challenging was it during those few years, work-wise and performance-wise?
I mean, it was interesting because I don't know if it necessarily affected us, the voice actors, that all these celebrities are like, cool, I'll do voice acting now. I don't, it's so invisible, it would be hard to tell. But it was challenging mostly because on the production side, nobody knew how to do it. The animators and the directors, and even just sharing files and footage and stuff back and forth, it took a long time to get on our feet. I was really surprised with Gremlins and Crudes, two of the shows I was doing that were affected by the pandemic. They figured it out pretty quick. I mean, it started off a bit wonky in the beginning where like most of the cast had like blankets over their heads and, they were recording stuff. I built this a while ago in my closet just because I was like, this is something I got to do every day, or something I got to do often enough that I need a dedicated space. I tried the blanket thing and it's amazing how much it affects your performance and is just so uncomfortable, because you're in like a Beauty and the Beast comforter, with a microphone just being like, it's very unpleasant. But yeah, the pandemic was a really, really weird learning curve. But it's funny, I find some shows still, like I'm on this show, The Loud House, where they're like, okay, just record from home. And I'm like, no, please bring me into the booth. Like, I don't want to be in here anymore. Like, it's basically solitary confinement. So now any opportunity I get to go be somewhere outside of this closet, not that I mind being here now, I'm just saying for performance stuff, because I got to do my own sounds, or levels and stuff. I'm like desperate to get out of here. So yeah.
I mean, any advice? Because I've got to say, when I started out this podcast, my wife found me with my head in my wardrobe, because I found that the clothes around me literally soundproofed literally everything. It was wonderful. So, you've got a lovely sound booth there. I mean, any advice on micro? I mean, are you a technical guy? Did you get all? No. Okay. So that question's going to go to waste. So I was going to say,
not even a little bit.
What kind of microphone do you use, and the equipment that you use to get all the magic done?
I have to read it. I have a PreSonus, like the little. I didn't know this was a thing. Is you need something to plug your mic into the little box that, because I was like, yeah, you just plug your mic into the computer. But oh God, why can't I think of what it's called? The
audio interface.
Yes, thank you. Well, yes. You need one of those, which I didn't realize. I basically went to Guitar Center and was like, this is what I need. And this is years ago, so this microphone is pretty out of date. But it's the Audio Technica mic. It's worked. I've used it on so many things and no one's complained. But yeah, I just got the cheapest setup I could that was a step above getting like a Snowball or something, because those things are, I think, not great. But yeah, and as far as like a booth and stuff goes, I just went on, I don't know if it was Amazon or some other website, and just bought this foam stuff and just filled my room with it, because I was like, I don't know how much I need, so I'm just going to cover every square inch in foam. I did, but recently, it obviously works. Had a leak, so
it obviously works, because it's like what they say, give a man a pen and he can write a shopping list, give a pen to Shakespeare and he'll write sonnets and everything like that. So obviously you may have got like the step above the snowball, but obviously it does the job, which is great. And you can get carried away with equipment and trying to get the sound of things right. Talking about your instrument, which is your voice, have you got a regime on how to keep it in tip-top shape? Do you do anything special so you're not left with a croaky voice, or you catch colds or anything like that could potentially stop production on a show that you're working on?
I mean, nothing that extraordinary. I do. There are some warm-ups and stuff I do before a session. Like I'll just humming is one of the big things. Like just be like, like doing deep humming and like kind of very basic vocal warm-ups. In addition to singing, I sing in the car a lot, and just kind of getting everything warmed up is a big, for me that's my prep. And I don't know, as far as catching colds go, I try to be cautious, especially now with COVID and stuff. I do my best to be cautious, but it's like I asked my buddy D. Bradley Baker, I was like, what do you do when you have a cold and you have a session? And he was just like, you just do it. And I was like, oh, okay. I was like, that's it, huh? Yeah, I was like, all right, cool. It's back pre-pandemic days. I was in a session with, this is Cree Summer, who's a friend, and she's awesome. She's played my mother twice, which is so funny. But she was wicked sick, like really sick. And she came and she was like, I'm so sick. And then she went in and did this. And I was like, I don't want to record with Cree. I love Cree, but like, I don't want to catch whatever's going on with her. But she just does it, and she sounded great. But like, I think there's some, especially pre-pandemic, there was an attitude of just like, yeah, we'll make it work. Now things are a little bit different when I'm still showing up to sound studios and they're making me put on the face shield and stuff. And I'm like, oh my God. But I don't know. I just try to hum and sing and drink lots of tea. And being hydrated is something people underestimate. Like there's things where certain voices I can't do if I'm dehydrated because my vocal cords are shot. So that affects it. Also, I'm just noticing that it says my name under here. I'm so glad that you wrote that, because when it asked me to sign in, it said, hello, my name is, and I wrote Inigo Montoya. So I'm glad that didn't show up there when I logged in.
Do you know what? I did wonder when you were calling through. I was like, who's that? I'll accept it. Who knows? But no, I mean, you know what? We all have our heroes in this industry, in acting and voice work. I mean, who are your heroes, and who did you sort of look up to when you were starting out, who you thought, do you know what, I want to be like that person, or be as successful as that person?
I mean, there's such a wide range, because it's like, obviously we all love Mel Blanc, and look at him, it's just like, dude's incredible. One of the first people I ever saw in a behind-the-scenes capacity was James Arnold Taylor on as Obi-Wan. I saw behind-the-scenes like featurette of him voicing Obi-Wan, and it sort of blew my mind. But I never in any capacity thought that was like, oh, that's a thing I could do. So that stuck with me, as I remember seeing him and going, wow, that's really cool. That guy's awesome. Which is funny, because now I know him pretty well, and we've gotten lunch and hung out and stuff. So he's a very, very sweet guy. But D. Baker is someone that I look up to, who's I'm very fortunate to get to decorate his house every year for Halloween with him. And he's just an incredibly talented and real dude. And man, there's almost everyone I meet, I feel like I'm like, wow, there's like a generation above me, like Cree and Gray Griffin, and God, there's so many. But all of them, I'm always in awe of what they can do, and just kind of hope to learn by osmosis, or whatever the term is, where I'm in a booth with them and I'm like, okay, cool, they improvise here, and they do, sort of studying their methods.
I mean, it is. I mean, technical wise, I watched behind the scenes with the lady that does the voice of Ash in Pokemon. And literally the talent and the technical side of things to actually record it, I just think is astonishing. But talking about heroes, I've got to say, I geeked out yesterday. I tried to tell my wife, but she wasn't interested. But I got a happy birthday message from Larry Kenny, the voice of Lino from the Thundercats.
Amazing.
I know. I was like, what? You know, which is pretty awesome. So, how do you choose, AJ, your roles? I mean, what does a
I
role
don't.
you don't? There you go. There you go. I'll
Yeah.
take anything.
No, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead, guys. I'm
Yeah,
sure I have
no,
an actual answer.
no. Yeah, I was going to say, you know, how do you choose your roles, and what does those roles have to actually get you excited about actually working on them?
I mean, it's so much of what we do now is reboots of things we loved from childhood, and so I am very, very, very ADHD and very obsessive when it comes to things I like. It's like, all right, for 6 months, all I'm going to think about is the Rocketeer, and or whatever it
Mm.
is. There's like very specific things that I would become obsessed with as a child, and now as an adult. So now I'm seeing a lot of those things. Not the Rocketeer, I wish, but I'm seeing those things come up. So there's certain projects where there was something recently where there was a list of characters, but there was one that I was obsessed with, and I was like, that's the only one I'm going to audition for. I was like, I could spend time doing these other guys who I sort of sound like, but I was like, this is it. This is my full concentration, and I can't really talk about what it is, but I'm very thankful that I got it. But it was just like brute force insanity where I was like, this is my obsession. So but the thing is I mean, so many of those things just go away. It's like you
Mm.
shoot something out into the ether, and you will often never hear back. So, I mean, I don't, my choosing process is me going, oh, that's cool. I'd love to do that. And most of the time you don't hear back. But yeah, I don't really choose them. They choose me. So and I don't mean that in a heady spiritual sense. I mean, literally someone goes, oh, okay. you know?
No, that's awesome. That is awesome. I mean, you're also a magician when it comes down to bending your voice, you know, your vocal cords to copy certain characters like Harrison Ford and, as we mentioned, Michael J. Fox. I mean, obviously, you know, we all pretend to try and do impressions, and I think that once we've had too many. You know, drinks at a party, we all come out with our impressions. But the question is how long did it take you to master you know, because on your YouTube channel, I've got to say, there is a video of you doing the voices of Sean Connery and Harrison Ford. And it is freaky. Honest to God, it is freaky. And again, I did the wife test. She didn't believe it was you. I said, no, it is him. You know, how much hard work is put into actually master these voices, say for Star Wars and Back to the Future.
Um, well, thank you, first of all. It's funny that video, I didn't know how to shoot something like that, so I was using the like little webcam thing, whatever is already built into my like previous Mac, and so it's slightly out of sync, and people were like, "This is fake," and I'm like, "I swear to God, it's not." Like, it made me crazy because I was like, "No, this is just me." I just was technically very stupid because it was like a .mov when it should have been a different one, and I don't know. But anyway, um, so it's weird because I mean, Indiana Jones and Han Solo are an obsession to the maximum. Like they are probably my top obsession in life and my fascination. Because as a kid growing up in the 80s and 90s, it's like Harrison Ford was the guy,
Mm.
at least to me, where I was like, that's who you aspire to be as a man, as a person is Indy or Han. And so I mean, not only watching specifically for Harrison Ford, to answer your question, like not only watching those movies hundreds and hundreds of times, but like once I got an inkling that I had sort of a sound down, I was like, oh, I can kind of hear that I could replicate that sound. I sort of put it out there somewhere years ago, and Jared Butler, who does not Gerard Butler, Jared Butler, who does the voice matching for Johnny Depp and Jack Sparrow, heard it and was like, "This is really good. We should talk." And I was like, "Is it?" And so we hung out, and he was like, "Yeah, you should think about like these sounds and this and this and this." And he was sort of the first person that I talked to directly about voice matching, where it was there's a science to it. And so then, not only had I studied him for years and years and years, but then I started putting together files and just hundreds of hours of me listening and repeating. And, it sounds insane, but that's literally what I did. And it's not perfect, but it's like, I'm just doing the best I can to bring that sort of like, hey, who's scruffy looking and chewy? Like there's certain noises he makes that are now just part of my biology, where I can. It's funny. I was watching Gremlins the other day with my girlfriend, and she was like, "Why are you holding your neck?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm having like sympathy muscle reactions to listening to myself, and I get this now when I listen to Michael J. Fox or Harrison Ford or Tom Holland or Chris Pratt, or when I voiced someone for so long, it's like I start to get like muscle twitches, because I feel myself wanting to replicate it. But yeah, it's honestly just a crazy amount of listening and repeating, and even Jack Sparrow. Like I used to do Jack Sparrow at parties, which is so silly, but like years ago, that's what I did to like pay my way through college. And yeah, just listening on CDs, I'd burn CDs of his dialogue and just listen and repeat. And it was, it's madness, but it's kind of something I enjoy doing. Like I very luckily got to voice Figment recently in the Disney Speedstorm game, and I had just happened to study Billy Barty's voice years ago, where I was just like, I wonder if I could do that. And so I like pitched it down to my pitch, and then was copying his way of doing things, and then pitching it up. And I don't know, it's just a fascination for me. So it's probably probably where that comes from.
I mean, I've got to say, it's crazy though. It's crazy the fact that you can listen and study a voice and then open your mouth and then replicate that. I mean, the only thing that I can do is Stitch from Lilo and Stitch, and that is it. That has got no use at parties whatsoever because people just look at you odd. So the fact that you can do Jack Sparrow as well as many other amazing voices. I've got to say as well, Back to the Future. Let's just quickly touch on that because that was one of your first biggest gigs. And if anyone's interested, if you look on YouTube, there is a behind the scenes sort of like short sort of trailer for it. And I love the moment that Christopher Lloyd said that he thought it was actually Michael J. Fox that had recorded, and it was actually
that's crazy.
you. Did you work with any of them in person, and what was that like if you did?
Well, it was weird because all video games, everything's divided up always because the just bulk of lines is so, it doesn't make sense to record side by side, or at least I don't know anyone who's really done that. But there was a couple sessions where I got to watch Christopher Lloyd do his doc, and then they brought me in to do Marty afterwards, and he was sitting there watching on the other side of the glass. So that was as close to working together as we really got to be, but it was still gut-wrenchingly scary to be like, he's watching me do this, and he's just, he's so nice and understated. He was like, wow, that was great. I was like, oh, thank you. But no, yeah, with video games, unfortunately, we never ever get to work side by side. But they would play me his stuff, and I guess they'd play my stuff for him, so we'd had that. But yeah, there was it's funny, in that interview, I'm like 40 pounds lighter than I am now because I was skinny as is, and then I was so nervous about that job that I couldn't eat. Like I couldn't keep any food down. I was like eating crackers and water just to stay alive because I was like, I had like 2 weeks before they flew me up north to record, and I was just so nervous. It was so I'm like wall-eyed, and I've got bags under my eyes. I'm just like, yeah, hi, hello, I'm AJ. I've never acted before. It's an interesting video.
I mean, I've got a picture of you in the game. Which I've got to say, it's an awesome job. It really is. And for anyone my age, Back to the Future was just like absolutely amazing. What I was going to touch on beforehand when we were talking about Harrison Ford, and I forgot, is that the sponsors of my show you would go crazy for, because a little
store?
while.
Is that what I?
Yeah,
because that what I see down there. Yeah,
they are basically the leaders, like auction house for screen use props and costumes. And I went down, I think it was about a year ago, to their headquarters in London, and they've got one in LA as well. And no lie, I went into the warehouse and they were getting ready for the auction, and literally in front of me was the Han Solo screen use jacket. Next to that, there was Indiana Jones hat. Then his whip.
Oh my God!
Literally in front of me, like 2 inches. I had my hands on his whip, the screen use whip, and I was just like in awe. So I'm not sure where you're based, but if you're anywhere close to LA, give them a call, have a visit. They've got warehouses, and they've got some amazing stuff to look at. They really, really have. If you're a big Star Wars fan, they sold an X-wing screen used one that sold for like $3.5 million. So
Jeez, I did. So actually, I did go. Not to make you tell that whole
no,
story, and
no,
then
you
yeah,
did. Yes, you
yeah,
did.
because I posted a picture with
Dan
Gizmo.
Gaston. Yes.
Yeah. Dan Gast. He's who. It's funny. Him and I talk a lot now about random things. Where I'll be like, "Did you guys ever auction off this thing from the Mummy?" Or like I'll ask him questions. I'll be like, "Oh, look on the website here." Lovely dude, very very sweet, and a big Gremlins fan, which is cool. I went a couple months. I want to say like 6 months ago ish, and they had the screen used. Or maybe it wasn't screen used, but one of the Grail Diaries, some test Sankara stones, and like just a bunch of stuff that I was like, this is insane. Yeah, I've been a big fan of theirs for a long time. So yeah, getting to go to their LA one was mind blowing to me because I've watched, Tested and Adam Savage talk about them for a very long time. And even before that, I was just aware because, as someone who replicates props and loves props, they document them so well that I'm, would use their stuff as reference when I build my own Grail Diary or, a Han Solo blaster or bell, whatever it is. Like they basically archive those things in a way that nobody else does. So it's a resource I use a lot.
And I totally forgot that you went there. So by magic, the picture of you and Dan will appear on the screen right now in post editing, because I remember you were stood in front of the glass cabinet with the gremlin,
Yes.
which I completely forgot about. But yeah, I just missed Adam. He was over in the UK, so the last time I went, I just missed him, and I'm a massive fan of him. I would love to meet him.
Me too.
Oh, his show is just fantastic. It really, really is. But no, that's awesome. I forgot about that. Dear me. Right.
Totally cool. No, I was happy to hear your description of. It would have cut to me seeing the jacket and the whip, and then it would have cut to me outside with police helicopters as they throw me on the ground.
Well, do you know what? I must have made them nervous. And I don't know why, because do you know when I was walking around the warehouse, I just turned round to Tim, who's a general manager here in the UK. I said, Cole, you must have some really good security. And I'm like, why did I just say that? I'm just like,
yeah.
But do you know what? They're a fantastic company to work with, and I've bought quite a few props from them myself. And I collect props myself, and it is a great habit to have. People don't understand the value that these props have, but to have a piece of movie magic, and especially if you can own a piece of Indiana Jones or Star Wars in your house.
Millions, like to have Indy's jacket or so. It also feels, there's a part of me that feels selfish. Like I'm in no financial position to be bidding on Indiana Jones's hat or whip or whatever, but like, it's like they belong in a museum. There's a feeling of like, it's like, this is just Johnny Five is just going to go in someone's house, like some weird guy is just going to be like, oh yeah, it's my Johnny Five. I would feel selfish being like, yeah, I've got the original Rocketeer helmet. It's just, it's above my cabinet. Is so bizarre and selfish. I would be running around with it, go, guys, look, do you want to look at this? Like, so I think that's why I love prop replicating so much, is I get to spend a lot of time obsessing and appreciating, but then it's just mine. There's nobody, it's not a piece of history. It's
you're a big Mummy fan.
Which, yeah, I do.
Which you are. I mean, they had the last auction. I held the book of the Dead.
The Book of the Dead, or
I'm not sure. But I've got a photo
big metal
of you.
One with the clasps.
The gold. It's like gold
yeah.
color. It was enormous. It was just amazing, the detail and the quality and the time. But I've got a picture of you here.
Was it me as Rick O'Connell?
No.
Yeah, it's funny. My buddy, one of my friends, Adam Wamsley, was like, we went to do a Halloween thing together, and I was dressed like that, and he's a photographer, and he was just like, can I do a photo shoot of you as Rick? And I was like, that's kind of a foreign concept to me, but sure. So now I'm like, oh, this is fun. This is a cool thing to like. Now that I've made this cosplay, I don't just shove it in a closet. It exists in photo form, which is someone who builds things. It's really cool to now have photographic evidence as opposed to me holding a Solo cup, on Halloween and a blurry image of whatever I spent hundreds of hours on. So, yeah.
So the rumors are
big Mummy
there
fan.
that Brendan might be working on a new Mummy movie. So I gather that if you get a phone call, the answer would definitely be yes.
Yeah, to play his illegitimate son. Yeah, that would be, of course. But I'm sure they've got that well covered with people who have been on many more television shows and movies. But yes.
But I've got to say, one of my favorite movies. It really, really is, and Brendan in that is just astonishing, and the whole cast. I just love him. Have you got a favorite? Because a lot of people don't like. Is it the Tomb of the Emperor, the third one?
I always confuse it with the Indiana Jones game, the Emperor's Tomb, or there's that one. The third one I don't care for, especially since Rachel Weisz isn't in it, which is jarring. But I mean, I think the first one is just my favorite. There's so much about the second one I love, and it's such a great sequel that it makes it hard. But I think the first one to me is probably the one I watched the most, especially over. It's funny, I watched it a lot as a kid, and then something about the pandemic, I feel like everyone sort of rediscovered the Mummy movies because they were up on Netflix or something. So we all started rewatching them. So I feel like there's been this huge cultural resurgence of people being aware of it. Like the first time I wore that Rick outfit, a couple people knew who I was, and the second time it was like everywhere I went, people were like, "Oh, the Brendan Fraser." They didn't know his name, but they were like Brendan Fraser, and I was like, "Yeah." So there's been this the Renaissance they call it, which is pretty great. I love that Renaissance.
And now he's won that Oscar. There's no stopping him.
Mind
so
blowing.
Who knows?
Yeah, him and Ke Huy Quan as it's nuts. Like, what reality are we living in?
I know, but it's great though. I mean, I've always said that Hollywood is a bit like playing the stock market. When like Brendan, for instance, he wasn't favoured in Hollywood for a while, and he disappeared, and then all of a sudden he's come back, and it's just sad because the talent has always been there. It's just these companies, these businesses. It's all about making money, and obviously, if a person isn't as popular, they won't have them in their movies. I don't know. I just think there's plenty of talented people out there, and unfortunately they don't get much recognition. And talking about recognition, do you feel that voice actors get enough recognition? Because like the stunt community, I don't think they get as much of recognition as they should do. I mean, do you think you get enough recognition in the work that you do?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, yes, if there was casting directors and stuff, I would love more recognition as far as that goes. But, what we do is kind of an invisible job. It's like being a composer or something, is you kind of want to be seamless. It's, I've said this about like with Back to the Future, my job was just to make you think Michael J. Fox did it and then just walk away. Like I'm not looking to be upheld or recognized for that so much as I was just like, I just want it to be good. It's the same as writers, directors, like you kind of just want to sink into the background. I mean, stunts too. It's like, I think a lot of us we watch a movie or we watch a show or whatever it was, and we absorb it and we go, cool. Like that's a thing that existed in its entirety. We're not thinking about the editor or the process. It takes sort of a different part of our brain to stop and realize, like, even for me, like I was saying before, like I was watching something and I like stopped and had to remind myself, I was like, oh, this character doesn't exist. This is a cartoon and there's a voice actor and there's animators. Like I have to separate myself from the process. And that's someone who does it all the time. And I still had to pull myself back and look into who the voice actors were. And as far as deserving recognition, I think that we're very lucky with the internet that we now have a presence that people go, oh, cool, that's my favorite actor from, whatever that show is. And so there's, there's an element of us getting recognized now more so than we were in the 90s. It's cool to see people like Rob Paulson and stuff and Maurice LaMarche who were in everything, now developing a huge following because of what they've done in the 90s and 80s. But I don't know. Nobody deserves anything. All I care about is that I get a credit. Like, that's all that, like, to me, that means the most when I see, like, AJ LoCascio as Han Solo or Gizmo or whatever it is. I'm like, yay, they remembered. That's the biggest deal to me. But
so we're just taking a quick break for a message from our sponsors. So would you like to take home a piece of film history or TV history into your own home? Find your own piece of magic with Prop Store, the world's leading auctioneers of film props, costumes, and more. So check out propstore.com or follow the link in the description of this video. And while you're doing that, why don't you use our special code? Our special code will give you 10% off anything in the Buy Now section. And the code is easy to remember. It's Brian10. That's BRYAN 10. And it's just above the finger, just here. Use that at the checkout to get your 10% off. That's propstore.com. I mean,
everyone
you
else
have
deserves color recognition.
Is it the Annie Awards that's for voice?
I believe so, for animation. I'm not sure. I don't get called for those, so I'm not. I don't know.
Not yet.
Maybe one day. I'd be so nervous to get up there if I like won something. I'm good with it just existing in the background for now because it's a lot of pressure.
To be fair, you've been on the panel at the San Diego Comic-Con. I mean, no more pressure.
That is a lot of work
there, which is got to be incredible to do. And I love the fact that we're seeing more voice actors come to conventions, especially here in the UK, which I think is fantastic. Which is showing that people are appreciating them, and obviously the following is getting more and more. But let's talk about Gremlins: The Secret of the Mogwai, because this is obviously inspired by an iconic movie that will always be in my heart. It really does, because it's just an awesome movie. If you could tell us a bit about who you play, which is obvious by the picture in the center, but a bit about the show and where it stands compared to the movie that everyone has known.
So I mean, I play Gizmo, which is wild to say. I'll never get used to saying any of these characters out loud. Like, it's very weird and surreal. And, as someone who grew up with all of these guys, I'm still, I mean, I voiced Marty like 12 years ago, and I'm still like, I voiced Marty McFly. Like, it's not real. I can't absorb it. So with Gremlins, it's very, very, very surreal. I love that poster. That poster's great. They just released that like yesterday or the day before. Let me adjust this. There's less headroom, and I could almost see my Gremlins t-shirt. So this show is basically it is the origins of Gizmo, essentially. I mean, Gizmo's existed for a while outside of this story. He's kind of he's a Mogwai. He's living his life in his own special place. But this is how he sort of interacts and becomes part of the human world, and what kicks off him eventually winding up with Billy in the future. So it's crazy to me. Like, you record the show, you read the scripts, but when you see it, it's like, you have no idea. It's not even like reading a book and then seeing the movie. Like, there's no way to picture how much more intense and beautiful it is once it's out. So I'm on like episode 8, I believe, of whatever's running or whatever's going to be released eventually. And it's a big adventure. It's kind of like if you've seen Avatar: The Last Airbender. It reminds me a lot of that, where it's taking the character of Gizmo and Sam and Elle and sort of setting them off from their home into this beautiful adventure filled with Chinese lore and monsters and things that I've never seen. There were so many moments when we were recording when they'd show the dailies, or what's the word I'm looking for, the animation, and I'd be like, oh my god, that design's insane. Like, I'd constantly be like, what is that? And they're like, oh, it's this thing from Chinese lore where there's this monster that does this or whatever. And I'm like, I've never seen that before. That's awesome. And they're like, yeah, well, it's not Western, it's not the Yeti and stuff like that we're kind of used to seeing. So it's just chock full of all these beautiful, brilliant, to us, weird concepts. And sorry, I just went off on a tangent, but like as far as how it stands in the lore of Gremlins, it kind of is the origin story of where the Mogwai come from, and how Gizmo wound up where he wound up in the movies. It's much bigger and cuter and crazier than I ever could have expected. It very much feels like if Amblin did sort of like a Hobbit, or something where it's this big adventure story, but also, so in my opinion at least, I mean, I guess I'm biased, like the way the Gremlins are and everything feels so spiritually close to the movies. They're just in a different setting, in a different time period. It's great. I don't know, it's really funnier than I even guessed when I was reading it. So it's great. I don't know. You can never trust people that work on a project, but I genuinely mean it. I've done projects where I don't say anything because I don't like it, but this is one where I'm like, this is fantastic. Like I was texting my buddy Brendan who directed it, and I was just like, dude, this is incredible. Like this is amazing. So,
I mean, the animation in it is just amazing. It's quite unusual animation,
it's very strange. Yeah,
we're used to. So I think that's going to catch our eyes. And obviously, two of the producers is Steven Spielberg and Joe Dante, that was the original director of the Gremlins movie. I mean, did you have any time with them, or were they literally quite far behind the scenes, like in their offices?
Yeah, I don't know about Spielberg. It's funny, when I first booked it, they sat me down and they were talking to me and Isaac, who plays Sam, and they kind of, it was weird. Someone from Amblin came in and they went, okay, I don't know if you guys know who Steven Spielberg is, but he's going to be executive producing this show. And I had a moment where I was like kind of insulted, and I realized he was mostly talking to Sam, who was like 11 at the time, or not Sam, Isaac. And I was like, oh yeah, I was like, duh, of course I know who Spielberg is. He's basically my DNA. But I haven't had any direct interaction. Hey, maybe one day. But Joe Dante, I should be running into him at some point for something. That's as far as I'm aware. I'll let you know in a couple days. But I have had mild interaction with him through Twitter, where I don't remember if I DM'd him or vice versa, but it's probably just me. Just talked about how much I love Erie, Indiana, which I don't know if you've ever watched that show.
That was a series, yeah. I
was obsessed with that show as a kid. I basically messaged him. I was like, look, Gremlins is great. Love Gremlins. Thankful for Gizmo. But I just want you to know that Erie, Indiana, there's an episode called Heart on a Chain where a boy gets killed. There's a love triangle where there's the main character and then his friend who's like, oh, he's skateboarding in front of the milk truck. And they're both in love with the same girl. And the girl has a heart problem. So then the little boy skates in front of the truck, gets killed, and then you find out later that, oh, the little girl got a heart transplant. What a miracle. And it turns out it was the little boy who was their friend. Like, I feel sick to my stomach saying it out loud. It freaked me out as a kid. I still feel like nauseous thinking about it. And I was like, thank you for that. That was one of the most uncomfortable, terrifying things to me. And like at the very end of the episode, spoilers, but it's like a 30-year-old show now. I don't know if you've seen this part, but basically the little girl takes off this necklace that was kind of possessing her and keeping her under, I don't know if we have time for this, but I'm going to tell the story anyway.
No,
keeping her keeping her under his control.
There we go.
Okay. But basically she has to let him go, this kid who, gave her a new heart. And so she like puts this necklace on his tombstone, and you see like a tear roll down the cherub's cheek on the grave. And like as a kid, that messed me up. And then I rewatched it recently, and I didn't notice, as the little girl walks away in the background, she goes off because you never see her again in the series. If you're paying close attention, sort of out of focus, you see the Grim Reaper follow her off screen. And I'm like, oh my God, she died. Like I was like, this is so dark. But man, brilliant. And so I was trying to convey to him, without seeming like a total dork, how insane I thought that was and how much that affected me. Obviously, in addition to Gremlins, but that's not something I feel like a lot of people approach him about. So I was like, I'm going to be unique. But man, that show, if for anyone who's listening who hasn't seen Erie, Indiana, I forget if it's on Prime or something, but it's one of my favorite things. It's like if Goosebumps and Are You Afraid of the Dark was like way, way better.
But do you think
it's awesome.
they should bring that back? Because you know there's certain shows that sort of brought back from those times. I mean, would you like to see it brought back, or would you like just to be left to where it is? You know, that
I,
nostalgia feeling.
yeah. I know they did a reboot of it, like the Erie, Indiana, like The Other Side or something,
Mm,
which was, in my opinion, not very good. No offense, Joe. But it lacked sort of the grit and the teeth that Amblin and those kinds of things have, where it's like, oh, these kids are like really mature and dealing with things that, only adults would deal with for the most part. And so I don't know. I mean, if they rebooted it now, I'd be concerned that it would lack that grit. Maybe if you got the Gremlins team on it, I would probably be brilliant, because there's so many things, not to keep, being like, this show's great, but there's so many things in the show that blew my mind, where, especially when we were doing ADR, where I'd see a clip and I'd go, oh my God, I haven't seen that in like a kid's show since I was a kid, where it's like, they're acting as mature as you should in those environments or
mm.
in those situations. It's not like, my biggest thing as a kid was when you watch the X-Men animated series, is Wolverine would never use his claws to stab anyone. He'd always kind of like do something else to knock something down on someone. And I was like, that's lame. But this show has a bit more of that, like, yeah, it's a little more adult in a way that as a kid, I gravitated towards, because, with Goonies and Monster Squad and Temple of Doom, I was just like, yeah, this speaks to me. So
But
anyway,
they
yes,
don't
I would
make
love.
the thing is they don't make things nowadays like what we experienced back in the day. So I'm quite excited with the Gremlins, because with the Secret of the Mogwai, because it just seems like it's going to be a whole different ride compared to what we used to. I mean, do you know what age range it's geared towards? I mean, is it okay for my girls to watch? I presume it is.
I I hope so. I don't know specifically what they were aiming for, but in my mind, it's. I mean, I'm all about just being like, watch it, and if you have nightmares, you know. But it's a combination of like really sweet, but then there's little things that are scary. There's some scary
Mhm.
moments in it. How old are your kids?
Well, thing is, I tried to get them to watch the movie. So I've got two girls, one 9 and one 5. And at 9, my dad let me watch anything as long as it didn't
Right,
have much
same.
much much sex in it. So
Right.
I was watching Hellraiser, I was watching all these martial
Wow.
arts and everything like that. I know, but thing is, I knew it wasn't real. But now I think
Right.
kids are quite easily influenced. So I don't know. I'm going to try and get them to watch it, because I so want them to enjoy the stuff that I enjoyed when I was a kid. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
I've tried to get
Yeah.
them to watch The Goonies. I've tried to get them to watch Flight of the Navigator, but
Right.
they're just not interested. And unless
Yeah.
it's high tech animation, or it's only 10 minutes long, because their attention span is like seriously gone. Kids now, their attention
Yeah.
span, because they're so used to watching social media, your 20-second video clips, anything more.
Yeah.
Saying that, though, my girls did watch Jumanji with me the other day.
The Robin
Uh,
Williams one?
yeah, and they sat through the whole
Okay.
thing, and
I
they
would
were all
say
right
that's
with that.
scarier in many ways. The spiders and all that stuff to me is way more
Exactly.
terrifying than anything. Yeah.
Exactly. Um, so I was going to say, I mean, do you have a plan? Not a plan, but when you left working on Back to the Future, you must have been on cloud nine. And then, did you have a plan in place in what you wanted to achieve? In the industry. Do you have a plan now?
Um, I mean, I just wanted to work. I mean, I still just want to work. It's funny. I was talking to Nolan North a few years ago, because he was on Voltron with me, and I was like, "Man, you did it." I was like, you're Nathan Drake. And I was like, are the jobs just rolling in? He's like, I'm just trying to work. He's like, I just want to
Hmm.
work. And so, I mean, yes, I have certain goals that I'd like to. For me, it's like, man, I'd love to keep voicing Han Solo, and I'd love to voice Marty again one day. And there's certain characters that I hold near and dear that I'd love to hit. But I just want to be able to afford to live is really where I'm at. Like, to be able to pay for my own existence is, I know the bare minimum, but in the way things are with streaming and us not really making residuals anymore like they did back in the 80s and 90s, just existing doing this is really the dream. I mean, obviously, I'd love to be a multi-millionaire from voicing some random cartoon, but right now I'm just thrilled to be doing what I'm doing, and to be like, sometimes I'll have this thought where like I'll be eating ramen, I'll be like, oh, Gizmo paid for this ramen. That's crazy. Doing some voice for a character I love is feeding me. Like, I know that's a very silly, small way to think about it, but like, that's kind of my goal. And well, with Marty, the funny thing is I was just like, God, I just need to prove that I could do something outside of an impression of Michael J. Fox. So that was a whole journey of me just getting an agent and trying to figure out what was next. And, I was with an agent who was just the worst for a few, months. And then I found a way to get out of that. And then now I'm with CESD, who's a wonderful agency. And the only reason I'm with them is at the time I wasn't in SAG. I was in, I don't know if this is interesting, but like I was in AFTRA, and they somehow merged with SAG, and this agency had told me, if you ever somehow wind up in SAG, call us. And so the day those those unions merged, I called them and okay, I'm in SAG now, and they were like, all right, come on in. So that was very lucky. But yeah, my goal now is just to keep working and existing and enjoying these projects. And honestly, I've been very lucky to do motion capture for things like God of War and stuff, and that's so much fun. It's like the perfect middle ground between voiceover and shooting a film, because except you're wearing those ridiculously uncomfortable and itchy suits.
With the ping pong balls all over you.
Yeah, which I wish were ping pong balls. They're much harder. They've now started making them softer, but if you fall on one of those things, it's like someone just jabbing you, in the back. They're very hard.
I mean, I normally ask my guests as well that obviously on all the projects that they work on, have they liberated any props or costume pieces? So it's got to be kind of hard for a voice actor. I mean, I'm sure that you get sent and get given some absolutely cool things from the projects that you've worked on. I mean, what's the coolest thing that you've been given as a way of thank you or a gift from a project that you've worked on?
One of my favorite things is on Voltron. They did actually animate. I didn't know this. They drew everything in pencil. There was a Studio Mirror who did all the animation, did it all on paper, which seems weird now, but they had got sent boxes and boxes and boxes of these not cells, but like just the drawings like you'd see in Disney before they turn it into an animation cell. And when we went to the wrap party, everyone got their character but me, and I was really gutted. I was like, what happened? Where's my character? And they were like, they threw them out. And I was like, what? And there was like anything past season 1 they tossed out. And I was like really upset. And so then like a year later, Lauren Montgomery, who she's done a million things, but she was one of the directors and producers on Voltron, happened to find one of Lotor, my character, and sent it to me. And that to me is very precious, and I love it. I mean, I will say this little gizmo that was floating around Comic-Con, it's a little hard to see, but when we went to Comic-Con, they were giving away these big foam gizmos that, I guess can I pull them out? Come on. There are these big things that would just be in people's bags that were like, just sticking out of the swag bag. And I was like, I need one of those. So they, I couldn't get it at the time because we were too busy, but they sent me one with a poster of the show. So those are really special because it's so rare that things get made into toys. I almost had a toy as Lotor, but that didn't come to pass. So yeah, we don't get props. I've kept all my scripts from Voltron, but mostly because I knew, I was like, this is a very special project. I'm going to keep my physical paper script in a binder, so I still have those with all my notes and stuff on them. But yeah, I wish I was like, yeah, I took a lightsaber from this project, but I'm trying to think if I took anything from. I don't think I took anything from God of War because everything was very like, you can't walk away with a big foam prop or anything. So just photos of me in spandex.
and obviously you are very, very busy because I was going to ask what's next for you. You probably can't say anything because your NDA is going to explode. But it's quite common knowledge on the internet that you are working on X-Men 97 that's on Disney. Now you start twitching. You're like, oh
Yeah,
no,
I'm
I
like,
can't
I'm
talk
waiting for
about
the
anything, you know.
yeah, a
So
laser sight just showed up on my head. Yeah.
So do we know when this is going to be released for us to all watch? I mean, can you say that? Or
I don't know. I've asked. I have no idea. I'm hoping soon, but I have no clue. I'm also very afraid to say anything because I know,
that is fine because again, there's a lot of original voices from the original animated series that's coming back as well, which is awesome. And just a little bit of a fact, I actually worked as Wolverine. This is me as Wolverine. There I am,
what?
dressed as Wolverine.
That's a great costume.
Over in the UK, there is a holiday camp called Butlins, which is countrywide famous, and you've got people called redcoats that are there that can sing, dance, and do everything. And one of my jobs was to do meet and greets as Wolverine.
Did you do the voice? You're like, hey, bub.
No, we weren't allowed. We weren't allowed to do the voices, and they had the Power Rangers there, and these costumes were worth about, in equivalent to dollars, about $8,000, $8,000, and the costumes were awesome to wear. But yeah, I mean, I look forward to X-Men. You're obviously very, very busy. How can people follow you?
I can say a little bit about the show. The only thing I can really say is it looks insane. Like from what I've seen, it's hopefully I won't get in trouble for saying this, but it's not. When I read the first script, it blew my mind because I was like, yeah, that's it. You guys did it. You figured it out. Congratulations. I was so nervous to read the script because I was like, God, I hope they understand what they've got here. But my very first audition I did with them, there's like, hey, thanks for having me. And then the energy I brought was like, oh my God, it's X-Men. Like I came in, it's amazing they didn't cart me out because I was so excited to be auditioning for this show and this character because I'm such a big X-Men fan. And like half my wall in the other room is like X-Men comics and toys and stuff. So there's like a holy 10 things that I'm absolutely obsessed with. And X-Men's one of them. And so there's... I freaked out and I was like, the same thing happened to me when I did a Ninja Turtles short with Kevin Eastman and I just geeked out and I was like, well, I'm not getting that. And I found out that was part of what made them so excited. It's like, wow, this guy really likes it. And I know Kevin Eastman was like, he was kind enough to indulge me and be like, yeah, you could be Donatello because like you just freaked out about how excited you were, which I don't advise other people do, but I like couldn't help it. And so when I did that audition and read the script and I was just like, this is God, they did it. They figured out a way to take something that was has its own language and has its own, there's like a vernacular or a way that in which the original X-Men series works and just make it something that we now are like, oh, this fits and yet is modern. And it's just great. I can't wait. I'm so excited. It's one of the things I'm like most excited for because it's so cool. And the team is so great. Bo and Jake, I don't really honestly know what they do. They just direct me. I don't really never know what anyone's job is in these things. They just get it. And it's so cool to like, when you talk to them on Zoom, like their entire walls are filled with X-Men statues and toys. And everyone's such a big nerd and we're all affected in the same way that I'm super excited for that project. So hopefully I didn't say anything out of turn but I can't wait.
I mean, when can you announce things? I mean, have they got a date when
no idea.
We can look out on your social media to potentially get any news?
That's probably, I'll find out. Like, I was shocked that they announced that the show even exists or that I was in it when they did, which was a while ago now. So it'll just probably happen randomly when I'm like, I wake up one day and I'm like, oh, okay, because that's how most of these things go. Like, especially with Gremlins, they were just like, AJ LoCascio as Gizmo like 3 years ago. And I was like, all right. I know with video games, I have to even ask if I can announce that I'm involved even like days after the project's been out because for some reason, games are really weird about credit. So you have to be very careful. But I don't know. One day we'll just wake up and I'll be like, oh, cool. Here's a cast list or here's an episode. So but I genuinely have no idea.
I mean, one of the last questions I was going to ask you is: have you actually done conventions yourself to go and sign?
Yes.
And what has been the most annoying thing that someone's asked you to do? Because I'm only saying this because I interviewed Shorey Dashlu, who's a wonderful actress. She was on The Expanse and she's filming The Penguin at the moment with Colin Farrell. But she did the voice of Gozer in the last Ghostbusters movie.
Oh,
and
wow.
I asked her to do something for me. I asked her to say, "Brian, are you a god?" in the voice of Gozer. And she said it was the best thing ever that anyone has ever done. And we've become friends since. And it's been great.
That's amazing.
But I can imagine at conventions, people are always asking you to do random things. So what is the most random thing that you've been asked to do at a convention, by the fans?
Random thing. God, I don't know. I mean, I always get nervous when it comes to, of all the things of doing Han, because it's like I almost never can conjure a line, even though I know that have those lines committed. Han's stuff is so responsive. He doesn't have monologues. Like Marty has some monologues and some lines that are beefy, but Han, it's mostly just like, "Hey, who?" So they're all fairly, so who's scruffy looking? So I always feel bad when people are like, "Do your Han," and I'm like, all right, name a line that's more than 3 syllables. But that's just on me. That's me going, okay, I got to conjure something. But I don't know if there's any. The thing that I get worried about is when, specifically with Voltron, it has such a intense fandom that is very much into shipping, which are you aware of what shipping? Yeah. That was a new thing for me. I had to learn what that was when I started doing that show. But people asking me to say like, "Hey, can you say so-and-so loves so-and-so?" And they'll like hold up their phone and I'll be like, "No." It's like, I do not want to start a war. But that's probably, it's not annoying so much as it's like, I don't want to cause a big issue because there's some things that I know the other cast members in the first season, when it came out, I was already on the show. I was just not announced yet. So I was getting to watch them make all kind of the mistakes. And so they did stuff like that. We're like, yeah, sure, I'll say this. And not realizing it was causing like Avengers style wars over people being like, no, this person loves this person. So that's something I'm very cautious about. Or writing like, can you autograph Keith loves Lotor or something? And I'm like, is that your real name or is that, is that you want the character? So it's, yeah, I wouldn't say it's annoying, but it's definitely something I watch out for. But I don't know. Conventions are lovely. I just don't do them that often because of COVID now. And the traveling sucks. I don't like flying on planes for hours with, 100 pounds of things to sign. And so I'm just like, I'll do local stuff if I can.
So there's no
But I would
chance
love
you
to come
coming
out
over
to England. And
yeah, I was going to say.
I would totally. I've never been to, out really over to Europe at all. So one day, if anyone's listening, I would absolutely love to do any sort of convention there because that's maybe once X-Men hits and Gremlins hits, people will be like, okay, he's pretty cool. But yeah, I was disappointed I didn't get to go to Celebration in any capacity. But my involvement in Star Wars is very invisible. Like I do my thing, but I'm not, a James Arnold Taylor or an Ashley Eckstein or any of that stuff. I'm, kind of off to the side. So
do you know what? I considered myself so lucky to get Katie on the show. I had her on the show a couple of weeks ago, Katie Sackhoff.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I was like, what? I've been trying to get her for a couple of years. But no, if you come over for a convention, Monopoly events are awesome. They always have David Hayter over, and he's just an awesome guy to chat with as well.
What a career he's had. That's awesome. He wrote X-Men and is Solid Snake, and that's insane.
Do you know what? I had to queue up to speak to him because I wanted to speak to him about inviting him onto the show because I'm a massive Warrior Nun fan. That was on Netflix that got cancelled, and he obviously produced that and wrote that and everything like that. So I queued up, and I felt really bad that I've queued up. I'm just going to speak to him. So I bought an autograph, and I was looking around the table for something because I've got to admit I've never played Metal Gear Solid. Never played it.
I've only ever played the demo that I got for free
from
from
the back of a magazine.
So
Okay.
Yeah, I'm with you. That might have been where it was from. It was from like some gaming thing. It had that Tomb Raider, like SX tricky.
But they
But I
go
only ever got
crazy.
to like, yeah.
But
Anyway.
literally the crowds go crazy. So it'll be awesome to have you over, especially at one of the Monopoly events. They're massive and they get some awesome guests, and I'm sure they'll absolutely love you to come over. So I can always pass on the details to them to potentially get you over to the UK, and you can see the
You'd
sights.
have a hard time getting me back home. That would be the problem. Is I'd be like, you'd see me at the top of a castle, like in Monty Python. I'd be like,
That'd be awesome.
one of those guys that are like, yeah, your mother reeks of elderberry. Like I'd just be housed up somewhere. No, yeah, I've always wanted to go. It's funny. We were planning on going. I have a real sort of like love-hate relationship with flight. So I had like a panic attack once next to Keith David on an airplane. It was my first time doing like a big convention, and I kind of like had a mild nervous breakdown because I'd never been in front of 5,000 people or whatever before. So I was still feeling nervous, then had to get on a plane, and Keith David was next to me, and I was still sort of having a panic attack over the convention. And he was just, you know who he is. He's like, he's cool as a cucumber. And so he's sitting there just like, man, I'm tired. And I'm like, yeah. and I'm just like so tense. And he's got a gargoyles hat. And I was like, I love gargoyles. You were great as Goliath. Super weird. But anyway, so I was just getting myself back into being like, okay, flying's cool. And then the pandemic hit. So I was like, all plans of doing anything kind of just went out the window. So now I need to get back into that.
Well,
that
in the UK, the pandemic is near enough gone. I mean, COVID now is near enough non-existent in the UK, which I think
is great. In LA, you would never know. Yeah, because in LA, it's like people are still got the face shields and stuff sometimes,
Really?
and the sound. It's really the sound studios are very, very protective because we're all spitting into microphones. So it's I don't know. It's so hard to gauge, but it's definitely wound down in a way it's like a relief. I'm like, oh, good. Okay, we can sort of hopefully go back to normal.
You know what? It's a pity you can't take your own mic to the mic studios. Do you know what I mean? You've all got your carrier cases of your own mics and plugging them in, and then that would take that out of the equation. But no, AJ, you've been a great guest. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, and I cannot wait to see this next installment of the Gremlins, because I just think Gizmo's always had a place in my heart. He really has. I think we've all tried to do an impression of Gizmo at some point, and I'm excited to see what Zach is going to be doing in the series as well, because obviously Zach from the original movie is got a part in the actual show as well. So you're bringing back some of the OG stars from the franchise to it as well. But I cannot wait. But AJ, you've been a great guest. Keep safe and stay super, my friend.
Thank you so much, buddy. This was great. So much fun. An hour just breezed by. So.